In the heart of an ancient African village, surrounded by dense forests and towering hills, life unfolds in a rhythm dictated by tradition. The villagers, deeply rooted in their customs, lived harmoniously with nature, respecting the forest that stretched endlessly beyond the village's edges. Tall, ancient trees whispered secrets from generations long past, and the ground beneath their feet was rich with stories of the ancestors. At the center of this village stood a modest hut where Rabea lived with her father and stepmother. It was a simple life, but beneath the surface of their everyday existence lay an undercurrent of tension and mystery. Rabea, a quiet and introspective young woman, had always felt an unexplainable pull towards the forest. She spent her childhood watching the trees sway and listening to the sounds of the wildlife that called it home. While other children in the village played in the open fields, Rabea often wandered alone on the edges of the forest, drawn to its mysterious depths. There was something almost magical about it, something that made her feel alive in ways she couldn't explain. Her father, though loving, often dismissed her connection to the forest as mere curiosity. Yet, deep inside, Rabea knew that there was something more to her bond with the woods. It wasn't just the quiet beauty that called her, but an undeniable pull, as if the forest itself was waiting for her. Her relationship with her father, once filled with warmth and affection, had grown colder in recent years. He had remarried Zara, a woman from a distant village, whose cold demeanor never quite fit into the warmth of their home. Zara, though outwardly calm, had a way of making Rabea feel small and insignificant. There was an undeniable tension between them, a silent war of wills. Zara's presence loomed like a dark cloud over the family, and her influence over Rabea's father seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Rabea had once been her father's pride and joy, but Zara had quickly taken her place, convincing him that she, too, could provide him with a life of peace and order. Zara's strict nature clashed with Rabea's more free-spirited personality. While Rabea sought solace in the forest's solitude, Zara tried to keep her confined within the walls of their hut, fearing that the young woman's strange connection to the woods would lead her astray. Zara, who came from a village known for its darker traditions, often warned Rabea to stay away from the forest. "There are things in those woods that no one should ever see," she would say, her voice laced with a quiet, controlled fear. "The forest is not to be trusted. You don't belong there." Rabea never quite understood why Zara harbored such animosity towards the forest. Her warnings only made Rabea more curious. But despite Zara's attempts to keep her away, Rabea felt the forest call to her in ways she couldn't resist. She knew the forest held secrets, but what secrets exactly she had yet to uncover. Her father, ever the protector, tried to keep the peace between his wife and daughter. But it was clear that his loyalties were shifting. Zara's influence over him had grown, and Rabea began to feel like an outsider in her own home. The love they had once shared was becoming more distant, replaced by a tense atmosphere of control and suspicion. Yet, despite everything, Rabea's heart remained steadfast in its desire to understand the forest. The days passed in quiet isolation, with Rabea spending most of her time wandering the village or staring longingly at the forest's edge. She knew that the answers she sought lay beyond the trees, and one day she would venture into its heart to uncover the truth of her strange connection. What she didn't know was that the journey she was about to embark on would change her life forever. The forest, with all its ancient power, was waiting for her, and it was time for Rabea to discover the depths of her destiny. Rabea's connection to the forest grew stronger with each passing day, but it wasn't just the trees and the wind that called to her. It was something deeper, something that stirred in her dreams. At night, when the world around her was quiet, Rabea's mind would drift into a different realm. These were not ordinary dreams, but vivid visions of an ancient woman, dressed in flowing robes of deep green and gold, her face shrouded by the mist of the forest. The woman's eyes sparkled like stars, full of wisdom and sorrow, and though she never spoke a word, Rabea could feel the message she was meant to deliver. In these dreams, the forest seemed alive, pulsing with a hidden energy, as if the trees themselves were aware of her presence. The woman, whom Rabea came to believe was an ancestor, would guide her through the thick canopy of trees, showing her forgotten paths, hidden shrines, and places where the air felt thick with magic. There was a sense of urgency in these dreams, as though the spirit was telling her that something important awaited her in the forest, something she could not ignore. One night, as Rabea wandered through the dream forest, the spirit touched her hand, and for the first time, she spoke, her voice echoing in Rabea's mind. The answers you seek lie within. Trust the forest. Trust yourself. The words left Rabea shaken, but more determined than ever. She woke with a start, her heart racing, and the forest beckoned to her in ways that were impossible to ignore. Yet she knew that with each passing night, her dreams were pulling her closer to something unknown, something that held both promise and danger. She could no longer dismiss the forest as a mere curiosity. It was a part of her, calling her to uncover a truth buried deep in her bloodline. But Zara noticed the change in her. Rabea's mood had become more intense, her gaze distant, as though she was constantly thinking of something far away. Zara's suspicions grew, and she became more watchful. One evening, as Rabea lingered near the edge of the forest, gazing into the shadows beyond, Zara's voice broke through the silence. "Why do you keep going there?" Zara's voice was sharp, laced with a hidden anger. "What is it that draws you to those cursed woods? You think I don't know what you're up to? You think your strange behaviour goes unnoticed?" Rabea turned to face her stepmother, her heart racing with a mixture of defiance and fear. Zara's face was tight with worry, her eyes darting nervously towards the forest. "It's just the forest, Zara," Rabea replied softly, though her voice carried a weight of conviction. "I feel something calling me, something important. I can't explain it." Zara's expression hardened, and her voice dropped to a whisper, as though she feared the very walls might overhear. "The forest is not what you think. It's cursed, Rabea. It's full of dark spirits and forgotten magic. You must stay away. Whatever it is that you're dreaming, whatever it is that calls you, it's not meant for you. The forest has a way of trapping those who seek it." Rabea felt the familiar tug in her chest, the pull of the forest that grew stronger each day. She wanted to argue, to tell Zara that she didn't understand, but the weight of Zara's words lingered in her mind. Was there truth to her warnings? Or was this just another way for Zara to control her? The villagers, too, began to take notice of Rabea's strange behaviour. Whispers spread like wildfire through the small community. They'd say, "She's been spending too much time near the trees," they'd say, eyes wide with fear. "That girl is different. Ever since her mother died, she's been acting strange, like the forest is in her blood." One evening, as Rabea passed through the market, she overheard a group of women gossiping in hushed tones. "My grandmother told me the forest holds powerful spirits. The ones who enter never come back the same. I've heard that there's magic in those trees, the kind that can take your soul," one woman said, her voice trembling. Another woman, her face pale, added, "And don't forget the stories about the witch who lived there long ago, who cursed the land after she was betrayed. They say her spirit still haunts the forest, waiting for someone to find her." Rabea felt a chill run through her, not from the cold, but from the weight of the villagers' words. She had heard the stories too, stories of dark magic, cursed spirits, and ancient powers that could either heal or destroy. The more she heard, the more her curiosity grew. But she also knew that the villagers feared what they didn't understand, and she could feel their eyes on her as she walked past, judging her every move. Despite the warnings, despite the growing sense of unease that surrounded her, Rabea could not ignore the call of the forest. It was no longer just an urge, It was a need, a burning desire to uncover the truth of her bloodline and the secrets hidden within the trees. The forest was waiting, and Rabea could no longer turn away. But with each step, she felt herself walking further into the unknown, unsure of what she would find, or what might find her. Rabea's father, Kwame, was a man of deep emotion and quiet strength, but he carried a past that he rarely spoke of, a past that Rabea never knew. Before he had met Zara, he had once been in love with a woman from the neighboring village, a woman whose name was Amina. She was unlike any other, a woman with a gift that connected her to the forest in ways that others could only dream of. Amina was a healer, gifted with the power to communicate with the spirits of the land, and her connection to nature was so strong that it seemed as though the forest itself had chosen her. It was said that the trees would bend their branches to her touch, and the animals would gather around her whenever she passed by. Kwame had fallen in love with her as soon as he laid eyes on her. He admired her beauty, but it was her spirit that captivated him. They shared a deep bond, one that transcended the ordinary, and their love was pure and unspoken. Amina, however, had a destiny that was tied to the spirits of the forest. She had been chosen by the ancient forces that governed the land to be their voice, their mediator. It was a role that came with great responsibility and a heavy price, but the relationship was doomed from the start. The villagers feared Amina's powers, and rumors of dark magic began to swirl around her. In the eyes of many, she was more than just a healer. She was a witch, dangerous and unpredictable. Kwame tried to defend her, but the whispers grew louder, and soon the pressure became unbearable. One fateful night, Amina vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a broken heart and a lingering sense of loss. Some believed that she had been taken by the spirits, while others thought she had fled in fear. Kwame never stopped searching for her, but it was as if the forest had swallowed her whole. Soon after Amina's disappearance, Kwame met Zara. She was kind, practical, and not at all like Amina. Zara did not possess any magical gifts, nor did she have any deep connection to the forest, but she offered Kwame the normalcy he desperately craved after the pain of losing Amina. She promised him stability, a life free from the supernatural chaos that had plagued his relationship with Amina. So he married Zara, believing that he could bury the memories of Amina and move on. But he never truly did. Deep down, he carried the shadow of Amina's absence, and it was a wound that Zara could never heal. Zara, however, had always known the truth about Amina. She had always been aware of the love that Kwame had for his lost wife, and it had filled her with resentment and jealousy. From the very beginning, she saw Rabea as a reminder of everything she could never be. Rabea's beauty, her growing connection to the forest, and the way her father's eyes softened when he looked at her, all of it filled Zara with a sense of deep insecurity. Rabea was a living memory of Amina, and Zara could not bear to see her husband's love for his first wife reflected in their daughter. As Rabea grew older, her resemblance to Amina became undeniable, not just in her looks, but in the way she carried herself. There was a certain air about her, a quiet power, a connection to something ancient, something beyond the ordinary. The more Rabea embraced the forest, the more Zara saw her as a threat. She feared that Rabea would one day uncover the truth about her mother's powers and the role she had played in her father's life. And that truth, Zara knew, would shatter the fragile peace she had built. Rabea, however, had always sensed that there was something more to her mother's story, something that her father was not telling her. She had overheard fragments of his conversations with his friends, moments when his voice would crack with emotion as he spoke of Amina, and she had seen the sadness that lingered in his eyes whenever her name was mentioned. Rabea had also noticed Zara's strange behavior whenever she mentioned the forest or asked questions about her mother. Zara would grow tense, her eyes narrowing, and she would change the subject with unnerving speed. It was as though Zara was hiding something that, if uncovered, would change everything. One evening, While going through some old belongings in the attic, Rabea stumbled upon a box that had been hidden away for years. Inside, she found an old, worn-out journal, its pages yellowed with age. It was Amina's journal. As Rabea read the entries, she uncovered the truth about her mother's connection to the forest, the magical gifts she had been born with, and the curse that had followed her since her birth. The journal revealed that Amina had been chosen by the spirits to be their vessel, to communicate their will to the village and the surrounding lands. But there were dark forces at play, forces that feared Amina's power and would stop at nothing to destroy her. Rabea also discovered a letter, written by her mother just before her disappearance. In it, Amina spoke of a great danger, of a betrayal that had been set into motion. She had written about a woman who would come into their lives, someone who would seek to control and silence Rabea's power before it could fully awaken. It became clear to Rabea that Zara had known all along about the true nature of her mother's power, and her hatred for Amina had been rooted in fear. Zara had never loved her father for who he was. She had loved him because he was the key to her own ambitions. Rabea now understood that Zara's jealousy was not just about her mother's memory. It was about control over the legacy that Rabea was destined to inherit. As Rabea pieced together the fragments of her past, she felt a new sense of purpose rising within her. The truth was no longer hidden in the shadows. The forest, her mother, and her own destiny were all connected, and it was time for Rabea to step into the role she had been born to fulfill. But Zara's secrets were far from over, and Rabea knew that the battle for her legacy was only just beginning. Rabea's heart raced with anticipation as she stepped away from the warmth of her home, leaving the quiet village behind. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the dense forest that stretched before her. The wind rustled through the leaves, as if whispering her name, urging her forward. She had decided, despite Zara's warnings, that tonight she would venture into the heart of the forest. The truth she had uncovered was too important to ignore, and the pull of the woods had become impossible to resist. The dreams, the journal, and the secrets hidden within her family's past were calling her, and she couldn't stay away any longer. As she walked deeper into the forest, the familiar sounds of the village faded into the distance, replaced by an unsettling silence that seemed to stretch for miles. The trees around her loomed like towering giants, their twisted branches reaching out like fingers, brushing against her skin. The air felt thick with energy, and every step Rabea took was met with the soft crunch of leaves beneath her feet. But there was something more, something in the very atmosphere of the forest that made her feel as though the trees were watching her, waiting. The forest was alive, its energy pulsing with an ancient rhythm that seemed to beat in time with her own heart. Rabea's breath quickened as the path narrowed and the shadows grew deeper, swallowing up any remnants of light. The whispers of the wind grew louder, as though voices were speaking just out of reach, urging her to turn back. She felt the weight of the forest's presence pressing against her, but her determination held firm. She was no longer a frightened girl searching for answers. She was a woman on the cusp of discovering the truth about herself, and nothing, not even the forest's eerie whispers, could stop her now. She pressed on, her every sense heightened as the air grew colder. The path seemed to wind endlessly, leading her deeper into the heart of the forest. And then, just as she felt she might lose her way, she stumbled upon something. A clearing. At the center of it stood an ancient stone structure, half hidden by overgrown vines and moss. The air around it felt charged, as though the very earth beneath her feet held the secrets of the past. This was no ordinary part of the forest. This was sacred ground. Rabea approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest as she took in the sight before her. The shrine was old, worn by time and the elements, but its presence was unmistakable. It was a place of power, a place where the spirits of the land had once been honored. The stone carvings on the shrine depicted scenes of nature and the spirit world, intricate patterns that seemed to dance with life, telling stories of ancient rituals and forgotten ceremonies. As she stepped closer, Rabea felt a shiver run down her spine. She was no longer just an observer. She was part of something much larger, something that had been waiting for her. Her fingers brushed over the stone, and she felt a sudden warmth, as though the shrine itself was responding to her touch. It was then that she noticed something lying in the shadows at the base of the structure. A small, weathered journal. She knelt down, her hands trembling slightly as she picked it up, brushing away the dirt and moss that had accumulated over the years. It was familiar, its worn leather cover feeling almost like an extension of herself. This was her mother's journal, the same one she had seen in her dreams. With a sense of reverence, Rabea opened the journal. The pages were yellowed with age, but the handwriting was still legible, flowing with grace and purpose. As she read the words, her mind raced, each sentence revealing more about her mother's life and the path that lay before her. The journal spoke of her mother's connection to the spirits of the land, of how she had been chosen to serve as a medium between the physical and spiritual realms. Amina had been powerful, capable of communicating with the spirits that inhabited the forest, and her gift was one that had been passed down through generations. But it was the next revelation that took Rabea's breath away. She too was a spirit medium, the last of her kind. Her ability to communicate with the spirits, to feel the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, was not a mere gift. It was her birthright. The whispers in the forest, the strange dreams, and the connection she felt to the ancient trees were all part of her destiny. She was a part of the forest, and the forest was a part of her. The journal went on to describe the pact that had been made, a dark and dangerous pact. Zara, it seemed, was no ordinary woman. She was a sorceress, one who had made a deal with the spirits of the forest long before Rabea's birth. Zara had sought power, and in exchange for it, she had given up her humanity, becoming something else entirely, something unnatural. She had married Kwame in order to keep her true identity hidden, using him as a means to control the family and the village. Her hatred of Rabea was rooted in fear, the fear that Rabea would one day discover the truth and unlock the powers that Zara had tried so hard to bury. Rabea's hands shook as she turned the pages, her mind struggling to absorb the enormity of what she was reading. Her mother's death, her father's grief, and Zara's jealousy. It all made sense now. Zara had known the truth about Rabea's heritage all along, and she had been doing everything in her power to suppress it, to keep her from discovering who she truly was. As Rabea sat there, the weight of the journal in her hands, she felt a profound sense of clarity. The journey she had started, the dreams that had haunted her, and the forest that had called to her were all part of a larger, ancient design. The spirits had chosen her, and now it was time for her to step into her true power. The forest was no longer a place of mystery and fear. It was her legacy, her birthright. And Zara, the woman who had tried to control everything, was nothing more than an obstacle in the path that Rabea was destined to walk. With the journal clutched tightly to her chest, Rabea stood up, feeling the forest's energy surge around her. The spirits were watching, waiting for her to embrace her destiny. And for the first time in her life, Rabea felt truly alive, her connection to the world around her stronger than ever. She had uncovered the truth, and now she would use it to confront the darkness that had been lurking in her family's past. The journey was only just beginning. Rabea returned home, the journal pressed tightly against her chest, her thoughts swirling with everything she had just uncovered. The night had felt different in the forest. There she had felt the pull of the spirits, the truth of her lineage, the power that was hers by birthright. But now, as she stepped back into the village, into the walls that had always sheltered her from the world outside, The weight of her discovery seemed heavier than ever. Her stepmother Zara was sitting in the living room, her eyes sharp and calculating as usual, though there was an undercurrent of tension in her gaze that Rabea had never seen before. The moment Rabea entered, Zara's expression shifted from casual indifference to something darker. Her lips curled into a tight smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "I knew you would come back," Zara said, her voice colder than Rabea had ever heard it. "Did you find what you were looking for in the forest?" Rabea's heart pounded, but she stood tall, clutching the journal in her hands. "I know the truth now," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I know about my mother, about you. You're not who you say you are." Zara's smile faltered for just a moment before it returned, but this time it was more dangerous, more controlled. "You've been poking around in places you shouldn't. The forest has a way of distorting things, Rabea. You shouldn't trust it. Your mind is playing tricks on you." "No, Zara," Rabea replied, stepping forward. "I've seen the truth. You're a sorceress, and you made a deal with the spirits to gain power. You're not human." Zara's eyes flashed with something dark, something ancient. For a moment, she seemed to shrink into herself, her features twisting with barely contained rage. But then, just as quickly, she regained her composure, standing slowly, her movements deliberate. "You think you understand everything now. You think you know the truth. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Rabea." Rabea's pulse quickened, but she didn't back down. "You've been controlling my life, keeping me in the dark, lying to me all these years. Why? What do you want from me?" Zara's lips curled into a sneer. "I've been protecting you, Rabea, protecting you from the truth that could destroy you. Your powers, your heritage, they're dangerous. They've always been dangerous. Your mother's magic was too much for her to handle, and it destroyed her. If you follow that path, you'll meet the same end." Rabea's breath caught in her throat as Zara's words sunk in. The images from the journal flashed in her mind, the stories of Amina's power, her connection to the spirits, and the price she had paid. But Rabea's resolve didn't waver. "You're lying," she said. "You want to control me, just like you've controlled my father. You're the one who's afraid." For a long moment, Zara didn't speak. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with a presence that made Rabea's skin prickle. And then, with a sudden movement, Zara's true nature revealed itself. Her features shifted, contorting into something otherworldly. Her eyes glowed with a sinister light, dark veins appeared beneath her skin, and her once warm, human face transformed into something monstrous, as if the magic that had long been buried within her had broken free. She was no longer the woman Rabea had known, the woman who had raised her. She was something far darker, something ancient. Rabea stumbled back, her heart racing as she stared at the creature before her. What are you?" she gasped. "I am the true power in this house, Rabea," Zara hissed, her voice low and full of malice. "I am the one who made the pact with the spirits. I gave them my humanity in exchange for power, power that you will never understand. Your mother was weak, and she died because of it. But I have learned to control it, to bend it to my will, and now I will do the same with you." Rabea's mind reeled as the magnitude of Zara's revelation hit her. Her entire life had been a lie. The woman she had called mother, her stepmother, was not a woman at all, but a sorceress, a creature of darkness who had given up her humanity for power. And now, she wanted to do the same to Rabea. "If you don't join me, Rabea," Zara continued, her voice dripping with venom, "if you don't embrace the power you were born with, I will destroy everything you hold dear. I will take your father, your life, your very soul. Everything you love will be mine to control. Your power is meant to serve me, and if you refuse, you will be nothing but a tool of destruction. You will bring ruin to everything around you. just as your mother did." Rabea felt her blood run cold at Zara's words. The sorceress's threat hung heavy in the air, a dark promise of the destruction she was capable of. But despite the fear creeping into her chest, Rabea stood firm. She could feel the power within her, the power that Zara had tried so hard to suppress, stirring inside her like a fire ready to ignite. "No," Rabea said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I won't join you. I won't be a part of your twisted plans. I am not my mother, and I won't make the same mistake she did. I will embrace my heritage, my powers, but not under your control. I will not be your puppet." Zara's eyes flashed with fury. "Then you leave me no choice." With a flick of her wrist, the room seemed to darken, the air thickening with a suffocating energy. The walls trembled as Zara raised her hands, preparing to strike. But Rabea didn't flinch. She felt the spirits of the forest stirring within her, calling out to her, their presence swelling within her heart. She didn't need to understand it all yet. She only needed to trust in her own power, the power that was hers by birthright, the power that Zara had tried to stifle. The room crackled with tension as the two forces, Rabea's emerging magic and Zara's dark sorcery, clashed in the air. The battle between them had just begun, and Rabea knew that this confrontation would define everything. She was no longer just a girl trying to understand her place in the world. She was the last of her kind, and she would not be controlled. Rabea's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped into the clearing deep within the forest, the ancient trees surrounding her like silent sentinels. The moonlight filtered through the dense canopy above, casting long shadows across the ground. The air was thick with tension, charged with the raw energy of the impending battle. In the distance, Zara's presence loomed, her dark figure barely visible in the gloom. But Rabea could feel her, feel the power emanating from the sorceress like a storm gathering strength. This was it, the moment of truth. Rabea had spent her entire life searching for answers, for a purpose. And now that she had unlocked the truth about her mother's legacy and her own powers, she was ready to face the one who had kept her in the dark. But as she stood there, the wind began to stir, and for the first time, the forest responded to her. The trees groaned and shifted, their branches stretching toward her, as if reaching out in support. The spirits of the land, once dormant, now awakened. The forest was alive with energy, and it was all for her. Rabea lifted her hands, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, the ancient rhythms that had long been a part of her. The spirits of the forest, her ancestors, her heritage, they were with her now. She could hear them whispering, urging her on, empowering her. The magic within her, the same magic that had flowed through her mother's veins, surged to the surface, filling her with a strength she had never known. The forest was her ally, and she would not let it fall to Zara's darkness. Zara's laughter echoed through the clearing, low and menacing. "You think you can defeat me, Rabea?" she sneered. "You are nothing but a child playing with forces beyond your understanding. You have no idea what you're up against." Rabea met her stepmother's gaze, her eyes burning with defiance. "I am not afraid of you anymore," she said, her voice steady and firm. "I know who I am, and I will not let you destroy everything my mother fought to protect." Without warning, Zara raised her hands, and the dark magic crackled in the air like thunder. The ground beneath Rabea's feet trembled as the forest seemed to recoil from the sorceress's power. Trees groaned, their roots twisting and shifting in response to the dark force Zara had summoned. Rabea felt the pull of the ancient spirits, felt them rallying around her, and with a single focused thought, she channeled their power. The wind howled, swirling around Rabea in a fury of energy. The trees bent toward her, their branches swaying with a life of their own, as if they were answering her call. The forest was no longer a passive backdrop. It was a living, breathing force that was fighting alongside her. She could hear the spirits whispering in her ear, their voices blending with the wind, urging her to stand strong. Rabea thrust her hands forward, and the earth beneath her responded. The ground cracked and split, and from the depths of the forest, roots and vines shot up, wrapping around Zara, pulling her into the earth's embrace. Zara screamed in fury, her own magic flaring in response. But Rabea's connection to the land was stronger. The forest itself was her weapon, its roots and branches fighting to protect her from the darkness Zara sought to unleash. Zara struggled, her form twisting and shifting as she fought against the binding magic. "You think you can control the spirits? You are nothing but a fool!" she spat, her voice twisted with rage. Rabea's heart raced, but she held firm. She was no longer the scared girl who had been controlled by Zara's manipulation. She was the last of her kind, a spirit medium, and she had the power of the forest at her command. She closed her eyes, drawing on the strength of her ancestors, feeling the deep connection to the land that had been passed down through generations. The spirits whispered words of encouragement, and Rabea could feel their energy flowing through her. In that moment, the wind picked up, howling like a wild beast, and the forest around them seemed to come alive. Trees creaked and groaned, their branches reaching toward Zara, trying to hold her captive. But Zara wasn't finished yet. With a scream of fury, she unleashed a blast of dark energy, pushing against the vines and roots that held her. The force was so powerful that it shook the very ground, sending Rabea stumbling backward. But Rabea was not alone. From the edges of the forest, a group of villagers, once fearful of the magic that had always existed in the land, emerged from the shadows. They had seen the battle unfold from a distance, and now they realized that Rabea was their only hope. No longer afraid, they came forward, carrying ancient tools and knowledge that had been passed down through generations. They brought with them artifacts, charms, and rituals that could aid in the fight against Zara's dark magic. One of the villagers, an elder woman who had once been a healer, stepped forward with a staff carved from the wood of the oldest tree in the forest. She raised it high, and the air seemed to crackle with energy. The spirits of the forest, stirred by the villagers' courage, responded in kind, their energy filling the clearing like a storm. "Rabea, you are not alone," the elder woman said, her voice steady and strong. "The forest is with you, and we will stand by you. Together, we will defeat her." Rabea's eyes widened with gratitude, and she nodded, her heart swelling with newfound strength. The villagers, once afraid of the forest's power, had come to understand that the magic they had once feared was not something to be controlled. It was something to be protected, something that was vital to their survival. Together, they would face Zara's darkness, united by a common purpose. With the villagers' support and the spirit's power flowing through her, Rabea turned to face Zara once more. The sorceress was still struggling against the binding magic, her face twisted with fury. But she knew her time was running out. The forest was no longer her ally, it was her enemy. Rabea raised her hands, and the forest responded, the wind howling with renewed strength as the trees and vines closed in on Zara. With a final, powerful surge of energy, Rabea sent the full force of the spirits into the earth, banishing Zara's dark magic once and for all. The ground trembled, the sky darkened, and a brilliant flash of light erupted from the heart of the forest. When the light faded, Zara was gone. Nothing remained but the echo of her screams and the silence of her defeat. Rabea stood there, breathing heavily, surrounded by the villagers who had helped her in the final battle. The forest was quiet now, but Rabea could feel the spirit's presence, their energy still swirling around her, comforting her. She had won. The darkness had been defeated, and with it, the forest was free. Rabea had embraced her true power, and in doing so, she had saved not only herself, but the very land that had given her life. As the villagers gathered around her, their faces filled with awe and gratitude, Rabea knew that the battle was over. But her journey was far from finished. The forest had chosen her, and now it was her responsibility to protect it. She had become the guardian of the land, the last of her kind, and with the spirits of the forest by her side, she would ensure that its power would never again fall into the wrong hands. The battle had been fierce, but it was only the beginning of her true destiny. The forest was quiet once more, the eerie tension of the battle having dissolved into the stillness of dawn. The moon, which had been the silent observer to their struggle, began to fade as the first rays of the sun pierced through the canopy. The spirits of the land seemed to rest, their whispers softening, their presence becoming a comforting hum beneath the earth. Rabea stood at the center of the clearing, her body exhausted from the fight, but her heart filled with a profound sense of peace. Zara, the woman who had spent years controlling her life with lies and manipulation, was no more a threat. The sorceress had been stripped of her powers, left vulnerable and helpless. She had been cast out from the world she had once ruled, reduced to a mere mortal, with no magic to guide her. The forest had no more use for her. Around Rabea, the villagers gathered, their faces a mixture of awe, gratitude, and newfound understanding. They had witnessed the battle, the struggle between dark and light, and they had seen with their own eyes the incredible power that flowed through Rabea, the last of her kind. They no longer feared the forest or its magic. They now understood it, and with that understanding came a deep respect. But Rabea's victory had not come without its cost. As the last remnants of the battle's energy faded, Rabea felt the weight of the responsibility settle on her shoulders. The spirits of the land, those ancient forces that had once been hidden from her, now looked to her for guidance. She was their guardian, the one who would ensure that the balance between the human and spiritual worlds remained intact. Rabea's gaze turned to the village, where life was slowly returning to normal. The people who had once feared the forest now moved through the land with a newfound reverence. The dark magic that Zara had used to manipulate them had been broken, the invisible chains that had bound them shattered. But the peace that had been restored was fragile. Rabea knew that it was her duty to maintain that balance, to ensure that the village respected the sacred traditions and honored the spirits. Her mind drifted back to Zara, now nothing more than a mortal woman. Stripped of the power she had once craved, Zara was left to wander the world, cursed to live a normal life. She no longer had the ability to control or manipulate anyone. The magic that had given her power was gone, and with it her influence over the village and over Rabea. She would live out her days without the supernatural abilities that had once made her feared and powerful. Rabea couldn't help but feel a small pang of pity for her stepmother. For all her cruelty, Zara had been consumed by her desire for power, willing to do anything, including using Rabea to achieve her goals. But now, without her magic, she was just like any other human, vulnerable and lost. The very thing she had feared most, losing her power, had come to pass, and in doing so, it had stripped away everything that had defined her. Rabea turned away from the village and walked deeper into the forest where the spirits still lingered. She could feel their presence around her, like an old friend, a comforting embrace that reassured her that she was not alone. The trees whispered to her, their leaves rustling softly in the wind. They spoke of the ancient power that flowed through her veins, a power that was both a gift and a burden. The journey had not been easy. She had discovered her true heritage, learned the secrets of the past, and faced unimaginable darkness. But through it all, she had grown, not just in power, but in wisdom. She understood now that the forest was not just a place, but a living, breathing entity, one that needed to be protected and respected. She was its guardian, and with that title came the responsibility of ensuring that the land remained in balance. Rabea paused at the edge of the sacred shrine, the one she had discovered on her first journey into the forest. It was here that she had uncovered the truth about her mother, her magical heritage, and the power she now wielded. The shrine, once hidden and forgotten, was now a symbol of her destiny. She knelt before it, offering a silent prayer of gratitude to the spirits who had guided her and to the memory of her mother, whose love and strength had shaped her life. As she stood and turned to leave, the villagers appeared, emerging from the trees with respectful silence. They had come to pay their respects, to acknowledge her as the new protector of the forest. In their eyes, Rabea saw not just admiration, but trust. They had learned to trust the forest again, to understand that it was not a place of fear, but of life and growth, a place that could coexist with the human world. Rabea knew that her work was just beginning. There would always be those who sought to exploit the forest's magic, those who would try to undo the balance she had fought so hard to restore. But with the support of the villagers, the guidance of the spirits, and the wisdom she had gained through her trials, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The forest was her home now, and she was its guardian. She would ensure that its power was protected, that its spirits were honored, and that the people of the village lived in harmony with the land. The magic that had once been a mystery to her was now a part of her, and she had become the bridge between the human world and the spiritual realm. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its golden light over the forest, Rabea felt a sense of peace settle over her. The battle was over, but her journey had just begun. She was no longer a frightened girl searching for answers. She was a guardian, a protector of the land, and the spirits that lived within it. And as she looked out over the village and the forest, Rabea knew that together they would ensure that the balance between the spiritual and human worlds would endure for generations to come. Rabea stood alone before the shrine, the same place where her journey had begun. The sun had risen high, casting warm rays over the forest, illuminating the ancient trees that stretched toward the sky, as if in reverence to the spirits that inhabited the land. The once ominous forest now felt like a place of peace, its energy vibrant and alive. A subtle breeze whispered through the leaves, carrying with it the soft murmur of the spirits, their voices now familiar and comforting to her. She had come a long way from the girl who had once been lost, unsure of her place in the world. Rabea was no longer the timid child that had feared the power within her. She had embraced her destiny, and with that acceptance, she had transformed into a strong, confident woman who now understood her role in both the human world and the spiritual realm. The forest, once a place of mystery and danger, had become her home, and the spirits were no longer distant entities. They were her allies, her guides, her family. Her thoughts drifted to the villagers who had once lived in fear of the forest and its magic. Under her guidance, they had begun to see the truth, that the forest was not a place to be feared, but a sacred land that needed respect and understanding. She had taught them about the delicate balance between the human world and the spiritual realm, showing them that the forest was not just a backdrop for their lives, but a living, breathing entity with its own power and purpose. The villagers had learned to coexist with the land, and in doing so, they had found peace and prosperity. Rabea's heart swelled with pride as she thought of how far the village had come. The dark influence of Zara had been removed, and the people now saw her for what she truly was: a protector, a leader, a bridge between the living and the spiritual. Her role as guardian of the forest was not just about keeping the land safe from those who would seek to exploit it. It was about ensuring that the traditions of the ancestors were respected, that the spirits were honored, and that the balance between the two worlds was maintained. She closed her eyes and felt the familiar presence of her mother, the spirit who had once walked this land, and the ancestors who had come before her. She could feel their love and guidance surrounding her, and for the first time, Rabea truly understood her place in this world. Her destiny had never been about avoiding her heritage or trying to escape her connection to the spirits. It had always been about accepting her responsibility as a protector of both the village and the forest, ensuring that the harmony between the two worlds remained intact. As the wind rustled through the trees, Rabea felt a surge of gratitude. Her mother's spirit, though no longer present in the physical world, had never truly left her. Through the journal Rabea had discovered, through the dreams and visions that had guided her along the way, she had come to realize that her mother's legacy was now her own. The magic that flowed through her veins was not just a gift, it was a responsibility. And Rabea had accepted that responsibility with grace, courage, and strength. Looking out over the land, Rabea felt a deep sense of peace settle in her soul. The battle was over, but her work was far from finished. There would always be new challenges, new threats to the balance she had fought so hard to restore. But Rabea no longer feared them. She was not the frightened girl who had once been manipulated by Zara's lies. She was the guardian of the forest, and with that role came the wisdom and strength to face whatever came next. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Rabea felt ready for it. She knew that the spirits would continue to guide her, that the villagers would support her, and that she was never truly alone. Her mother's spirit, the ancestors, and the forest itself would always be with her, offering their protection and guidance as she stepped into her future. Rabea smiled softly as she turned away from the shrine, her heart filled with a sense of purpose. She was no longer a passive observer of her fate. She was the one who would shape the future, the one who would ensure that the village and the forest continued to coexist in harmony for generations to come. The power she had once feared was now a part of her, and she was ready to use it wisely for the good of both the people and the land. As she walked back toward the village, the wind gently tugging at her hair, Rabea knew that the journey was far from over. There would be many more lessons to learn, many more challenges to face, but she was no longer afraid. She had found her purpose, and with it, she had found her strength. The future was hers to shape, and she would do so with wisdom, courage, and love for the land and the spirits that had shaped her destiny.